My daughter called me a broke loser at my birthday dinner. 20 witnesses heard every word. My name is Darius Hayes. What those witnesses didn't know was that I own the building my daughter lives in, worth $22 million. What they also didn't know was that she'd been paying discounted rent for 5 years, $4,100 instead of $8,200 monthly, $250,000 in family subsidies from the father she just humiliated. The next morning, I made one phone call to my attorney. 30 days later, Vanessa received her new lease agreement. Full market rate, $8,200, no more family discount. She thought she was embarrassed by her janitor father. She had no idea her landlord was sitting right there, listening to every insult. You see, I'd been testing her character for years, hoping for respect that never came. Instead, I got public mockery from someone living off my generosity. I hope you'll stick around for this story. Hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from, because sometimes the people you look down on own the ground you're standing on. This is how my daughter learned that family discounts require family respect. For 5 years, my daughter believed I was still working as a night janitor in her building. Every morning at 7, she'd see me in my Navy Dickies uniform, maintenance patch embroidered on the chest, heading to the utility room with my toolbox. "Morning, Dad," she'd say, sometimes slipping me a $20 bill. "Get yourself some breakfast." I'd take the money and thank her. What else could I do? I was testing her character, waiting for the day she'd respect me for who I was, not what she thought I did for a living. The truth? I'd bought the building in 2018 for $22 million. Hayes Holdings LLC owned not just her building, but 3 others across Seattle. My net worth sat at $61 million, built from 30 years of saving every custodial paycheck and investing in real estate. But I still did maintenance work, not because I needed the job, because it kept me sharp. I knew every pipe, every electrical circuit, every tenant complaint. When you own something, you take care of it properly. Vanessa's friends thought she was so generous, helping her poor immigrant father. "You're such a saint, supporting him like that," her friend Michelle would say. "Not everyone would take care of their parents." Supporting me. Vanessa was living in an 1,800-square-foot corner penthouse with city views and original hardwood floors. Comparable units in the building rented for $8,200 minimum. She was paying $4,100, exactly half the market rate. I called it the family adjustment. She called it getting lucky with a cheap apartment. Her building, my building, sat in the heart of Capitol Hill's luxury district. The 1923 brick structure had been completely renovated when I purchased it. Marble lobby, restored elevator, premium finishes throughout. Other tenants paid full freight. Vanessa got the family discount. She never questioned why her rent was so low. Never wondered why the property manager, Scott Reynolds, always addressed me as Mr. Hayes and asked for my approval on building decisions. Never noticed the building directory in the lobby that listed Hayes Holdings owner right by the mailboxes. The signs were everywhere. She just chose not to see them. When her fiancé Derek first visited the building, he was impressed. "How did you score such a nice place for so little?" he asked her. "I'm just smart about finding deals," she told him. "Unlike my dad, who can barely make ends meet." Derek seemed uncomfortable with how she talked about me, but he never said anything directly. His parents, Richard and Elizabeth Bradford, were tech executives worth millions themselves. They understood real estate values. They knew a $4,100 penthouse in this neighborhood didn't make sense. But they also knew better than to question their future daughter-in-law's family situation. Meanwhile, Vanessa kept playing the role of the successful daughter helping her struggling father. She'd invite me to dinner occasionally, always to modest restaurants, always insisting on paying. "I can't let you spend your money, Dad," she'd say. "Save it for your retirement." Retirement? I was collecting $156,000 in rental income every month. My retirement was already secured, but I stayed quiet. I wore the uniform, I carried the toolbox. I let her believe what she wanted to believe about my life, while I watched what she truly believed about respect, family, and the value of honest work. The test was simple. Would she eventually see past the job title to the man underneath? Would she defend me when others looked down on me? Would she show the same respect to a janitor that she'd show to a business owner? For 5 years, the answer was becoming clearer every day. By October 2024, Vanessa's disrespect had escalated beyond private conversations. Her engagement to Derek Bradford meant constant interaction with his wealthy family, and she was increasingly embarrassed by her janitor father. The wedding was planned for December 7th. Venue cost $85,000 at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Guest list, 200 of Seattle's tech elite. My invitation came with conditions. "You need to dress better, Dad," Vanessa told me during a coffee meeting in September. Derek's parents are very image-conscious. His father sits on Microsoft's board of advisors. I asked what she meant by dress better. Like, a real suit, not something from Walmart. And maybe don't mention the janitor thing unless someone specifically asks. Don't mention my job. I'd spent 40 years building a work ethic that purchased a $61 million real estate portfolio. But to her, honest labor was shameful. The stakes grew higher when I met Elizabeth Bradford at a city planning commission meeting. I was there as Hayes Holdings representative, seeking permits for a new building renovation. She was there as a commissioner, reviewing applications. "Darius Hayes from Hayes Holdings," I introduced myself, shaking her hand after the meeting. She paused, studying my face. "Hayes, that name sounds familiar. Do we know each other?" "I don't believe so," I replied, though something in her expression suggested otherwise. That night, Vanessa called with more wedding restrictions. "We're thinking about having a small family table," she said. "Just immediate family. You'd sit with my friends instead. A separate table. At my daughter's wedding. Because my presence might embarrass her in front of the Bradfords." "What if Derek's parents ask about your family?" I asked. "I'll figure it out," she said. "Maybe I'll just say you're a family friend." A family friend. Not her father who sacrificed everything to give her opportunities. Not the man who paid her college tuition, covered her graduate school costs, and subsidized her housing for 5 years. A family friend. The financial implications were staggering. If I stopped enabling her lifestyle, Vanessa couldn't afford her apartment on her marketing coordinator salary. $68,000 annually wouldn't cover an $8,000 monthly rent, plus utilities, plus the luxury lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. She'd have to downsize, move to a smaller apartment, get roommates, face the reality of Seattle's housing market without Daddy's hidden subsidies. More importantly, Derek was starting to notice the inconsistencies. He'd asked Vanessa pointed questions about my living situation, my work schedule, my relationship with the building staff. Smart guy. He knew something didn't add up. "Your dad seems to know an awful lot about building operations for a night janitor," he mentioned to her after visiting one evening. "He's just been there a long time," she explained. "You pick things up." But Derek's engineering mind wasn't satisfied with vague explanations. He was asking the right questions. Soon, he'd find the right answers. Elizabeth Bradford was also asking questions. After our city planning meeting, she'd started paying attention to Hayes Holdings permits and applications. Her husband Richard had connections throughout Seattle's business community. One phone call could reveal everything. The irony was painful. Vanessa was hiding me from people who would actually respect my accomplishments. The Bradfords understood business success, real estate investment, immigrant entrepreneurship. They'd be impressed by my story, if they knew it. Instead, she was setting me up as the embarrassing relative who needed to be managed and minimized. If I stayed silent much longer, I'd lose more than money or respect. I'd lose my daughter entirely. She'd marry into the Bradford family believing her father was a burden to hide, rather than a man she could be proud of. The upcoming birthday dinner would be my last chance to see who she really was, and who I'd raised her to become. October 15th, 7:30 p.m., Il Cielo Restaurant on Capitol Hill, 3 blocks from my building. White tablecloth service, $45 entrees, the kind of place Vanessa chose to impress Derek's family. I arrived in my best suit, a charcoal Brooks Brothers I'd worn to real estate closings. Clean shave, polished shoes, looking like any other successful businessman celebrating his birthday. 23 guests filled the private dining room. Derek's parents, Richard and Elizabeth Bradford. His tech colleagues from Microsoft. Vanessa's marketing friends. Everyone dressed for success, everyone talking about stock options and property values. Except me. I was seated at a separate table, alone. "Dad sits here," Vanessa announced to the room, gesturing to a small table near the back. "He's more comfortable with space. More comfortable, or more embarrassing?" I took my assigned seat and watched my daughter work the room. She introduced Derek's colleagues to my friends from the marketing department. She discussed vacation plans to Napa Valley. She laughed at jokes about Seattle's housing market. When Richard Bradford mentioned his real estate investments, I nearly spoke up. We probably knew the same developers, the same attorneys, the same market trends. Instead, I stayed quiet and listened. "Property values in Capitol Hill have exploded," Richard said. "We looked at a building there last year.
$22 million for a historic renovation. That was my building. That was my...
He was talking about my building. Smart investment, Elizabeth added. Whoever bought that property made a fortune. Hayes Holdings, I think the company was called. Vanessa was standing 3 feet away. She heard every word. Hayes Holdings, her landlord, though she'd never bothered to learn the name. She still didn't connect the dots. Dinner arrived. Also buco for me, ordered without looking at prices. The waiter brought wine, a $200 Barolo I'd selected earlier. Who ordered the expensive wine? Vanessa asked loudly, scanning the tables. I did, I replied. Her face flushed red. She walked over to my table, voice carrying across the room. Dad, you can't afford wine like that. I can afford it, I said calmly. With what money? Your janitor's salary? The room went quiet. 23 people stopped eating to watch my daughter lecture me about money. You're embarrassing yourself, she continued. These people know what things cost. Derek looked mortified. His parents exchanged glances. Elizabeth Bradford's expression was particularly sharp, like she was solving a puzzle. I'd like to pay for everyone's dinner, I announced, standing up. The silence deepened. Vanessa's face went from red to white. Absolutely not, she snapped. You're not paying for anything. Why not? Because you don't have that kind of money. Stop pretending to be something you're not. Her voice echoed off the restaurant walls. Derek started to stand, probably to intervene, but his father put a hand on his arm. I'm not pretending, I said quietly. Yes, you are. You're just a broke loser trying to impress my fiancé's family. Broke loser, in front of 23 witnesses. In front of people who controlled millions in tech stock, who understood real business success, who could have been my peers if she'd let them. Elizabeth Bradford was staring at me intently now, recognition flickering in her eyes. Vanessa, Derek said softly. Maybe we should... No, she cut him off. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of supporting him. I'm tired of pretending he's anything more than a building janitor who can barely pay his bills. Supporting me? The irony was staggering. You think I need your support? I asked. Obviously. Who else is going to help you? You make minimum wage cleaning offices. I pulled out my phone. One text message to Patricia Morgan, my attorney. Please prepare lease renewal for Unit 2402. Market rate, standard terms. What are you doing? Vanessa demanded. Texting my attorney. She laughed. A harsh, mocking sound. Your attorney? Dad, stop it. You're making this worse. The text confirmation came back immediately. We'll prepare documents tonight. Send tomorrow morning. I showed Vanessa the screen. Patricia Morgan, partner, Morgan & Associates Real Estate Law. Her laughter died. I don't understand, she said. You will, I replied. Elizabeth Bradford was pulling out her own phone now, typing quickly. Probably Googling Hayes Holdings, cross-referencing property records, connecting pieces. Richard Bradford leaned toward his wife, whispering something urgent. Derek looked confused and concerned. Mr. Hayes, maybe we could all... The check, please, I called to the waiter. Dad, no, Vanessa protested. My treat, I said firmly. All of it. I handed the waiter my black American Express card. The same card I used for million-dollar property purchases. While we waited for the card to process, I stood and addressed the room. Thank you all for celebrating my birthday, I said. Vanessa, Derek, I hope you have a wonderful engagement. And to the Bradfords, it was a pleasure meeting you. I look forward to future conversations. Elizabeth Bradford nodded slowly. She'd figured it out. The waiter returned with my card and the receipt. $4,200 for 23 dinners and premium wine. I signed it and left a 20% tip. Happy birthday to me, I said, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Elizabeth Bradford's voice. Richard, we need to talk. The next morning, October 16th, I arrived at the building at 6 a.m. for my usual maintenance rounds. Not because I had to, because I wanted to see everything clearly before making my next move. Scott Reynolds was already in the lobby reviewing work orders on his tablet. He'd been my property manager for 8 years since I bought the building. Good guy, former Navy, understood respect and professionalism. Morning, Mr. Hayes, he said, same as always. How was the birthday dinner? Educational, I replied. Any issues overnight? Quiet night. Mrs. Patterson in 1403 reported a dripping faucet. I'll handle it this afternoon. We discussed building operations for 10 minutes. Tenant concerns, upcoming maintenance, budget approvals, normal landlord-property manager conversation. At 7:15, Vanessa appeared in the lobby, dressed for work, moving quickly toward the elevator. She glanced at Scott and me talking, but barely acknowledged our presence. What she didn't hear was Scott's next comment. Sir, about the lease renewals Patricia sent over. Unit 2402 is scheduled for November 15th delivery. Market rate adjustment as requested. Confirmed, I said. Standard processing. Vanessa was 3 feet away checking her phone, oblivious to the fact that her rent fate was being decided right next to her. The elevator arrived. She stepped in without a word to either of us. She has no idea, does she? Scott asked quietly. None, I confirmed. At 9 a.m., my phone rang. Patricia Morgan's office. Darius, the lease documents are ready. Should I email them to Vanessa directly or coordinate through Scott? Send them directly. Official business communication. Standard 30-day notice period? By the book, Patricia. Everything legal and professional. I was standing in the building's utility room when I took the call, wearing my maintenance uniform, surrounded by water heaters and electrical panels. To any casual observer, I looked like exactly what Vanessa claimed I was, a janitor taking a personal call. Luis Gomez knocked on the utility room door. He'd been my colleague for 15 years when we both worked janitorial services. Now he was assistant building manager, earning $65,000 annually managing Hayes Holdings properties. Bill, you got a minute? He asked in Spanish. Always, hermano. What's up? Vanessa walked past me this morning without saying hello. Again. You know I helped her move into 2402 5 years ago, right? Carried her furniture, set up her cable. Now she acts like I don't exist. She's going through some changes, I said diplomatically. Man, if she knew you owned this place. Luis shook his head. She treats you like you're beneath her, her own father. Character reveals itself over time, I replied. When you going to tell her the truth? Soon. At 11 a.m., Elizabeth Bradford called the building's main number. Scott transferred the call to my cell phone. Mr. Hayes? This is Elizabeth Bradford. We met last night at Vanessa's dinner. Of course, Mrs. Bradford. How can I help you? I sit on the City Planning Commission. I've been reviewing your permit applications for the Fremont Avenue renovation project. Very impressive development plans. She was fishing, connecting dots, confirming suspicions. Thank you. It's been a challenging project. I imagine so. $20 million renovations usually are. Silence. She was testing whether I'd correct her or confirm my involvement in major real estate deals. The permits should be approved next month, I said simply. Excellent. Richard and I would love to discuss potential investment opportunities with Hayes Holdings. Perhaps lunch sometime? I'd be honored. After we hung up, I sat in the utility room surrounded by the infrastructure of my own building. Pipes I'd installed, electrical systems I'd upgraded, mechanical equipment I maintained personally. Vanessa thought I was hiding in here because I was ashamed of my work. Actually, I was here because I loved my work. Every aspect of it, from the hands-on maintenance to the strategic investments to the legal negotiations. At noon, Patricia's email notification chimed on my phone. Lease documents sent to tenant 2402. Copy forwarded to your secure folder. The wheels were in motion. 3 days after the restaurant incident, Vanessa called with wedding updates. Her voice was tense, rushed, like she was checking an unpleasant task off her list. Dad, we need to talk about December 7th. The wedding? Yes. Derek's parents want to meet with all the families next weekend. Plan logistics, discuss seating arrangements, that kind of thing. I heard strain in her voice. The Bradfords were asking questions she couldn't answer. What time and where? Sunday, 2 p.m. at their house in Bellevue. But Dad... Long pause. I need you to understand something. Derek's family moves in certain circles. Tech executives, venture capitalists, old Seattle money, they have expectations. What kind of expectations? About presentation, about background, about how we represent ourselves. How we represent ourselves. Not how I represent myself. How we represent ourselves. My identity was apparently a family branding problem. Vanessa, what exactly are you asking me to do? Maybe we could say you're retired. Instead of mentioning the janitor thing, retired. From what? She'd never asked about my career before maintenance work. Never wondered how an immigrant from El Salvador had saved enough to support her college education. What would I say when they ask what I did before retirement? I don't know. Facilities management, building operations, something that sounds more professional. Facilities management. She was asking me to lie about honest work to impress people who'd actually respect the truth. I'll think about it, I said. Sunday arrived. The Bradford house was a $6 million modernist masterpiece overlooking Lake Washington. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, Art that probably cost more than most people's cars. Richard and Elizabeth Bradford welcomed us in their foyer. Derek looked nervous. Vanessa looked like she was preparing for a performance. "Darius," Elizabeth said, shaking my hand with curious intensity, "so good to see you again." Again? We'd met once at the restaurant. Likewise, Mrs. Bradford. We moved to their living room, floor-to-ceiling windows, panoramic lake views, the kind of space that commanded respect through pure architectural achievement. "So, Darius," Richard began, settling into a leather chair that probably cost $5,000. "Vanessa mentioned you work in building operations?" I glanced at Vanessa. She was staring at me with desperate eyes, silently begging me to play along with her story. "I work in real estate," I said carefully. "Interesting. Development? Investment? Property management?" Elizabeth was watching this exchange like a chess match, calculating each move. "All three," I replied. Vanessa's face went pale. This wasn't the script she'd written. "Really?" Richard leaned forward. "Which markets? Seattle's been incredibly dynamic recently. Capitol Hill, Fremont, Georgetown, some East Side properties." "Capitol Hill especially," Elizabeth added. "We looked at a historic building there last year. Beautiful renovation, but the asking price was steep. $22 million, if I remember correctly." There it was. The test. She knew exactly which building, exactly which sale. "Good investment," I said simply. "You think so?" The buyer, Hayes Holdings, I believe, paid premium market value. Vanessa was looking back and forth between us like she was watching tennis, missing every serve but sensing the game was important. "Sometimes premium prices reflect premium value," I replied. Elizabeth smiled. She'd confirmed her suspicions. Derek jumped in, trying to redirect the conversation. "Dad's been asking about the guest list. We're thinking around 200 people." 200? Vanessa's voice cracked slightly. That's more than we discussed." "Well," Richard said, "Elizabeth and I have business associates, board members, family friends. It's hard to trim the list without causing offense." I watched Vanessa calculate costs in real time. 200 guests instead of 150. Premium venue, premium catering, premium everything. "Of course," she said weakly. "Whatever you think is appropriate." "The venue coordinator mentioned we could add a family table," Elizabeth said. "Sometimes older relatives prefer quieter seating arrangements. The family table? Code for, where should we put the embarrassing relatives?" "That's thoughtful," Vanessa said quickly. "My dad might appreciate that. Might appreciate it." She was volunteering to segregate me before anyone even suggested it. Derek looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Actually, I was hoping Mr. Hayes would sit with us at the main table. I'd like to hear more about his real estate work." "Oh," Vanessa stammered. "Well, he's not really in real estate. I mean, not like investment real estate. More like maintenance and operations." "Facilities management," I corrected gently, using her earlier phrase. "Right, facilities management." Elizabeth's eyebrows rose slightly. She was enjoying this. "Fascinating field," Richard said. "The operational side of real estate is incredibly complex, especially in historic buildings with unique infrastructure requirements." He was talking directly to my expertise. Historic renovations, infrastructure challenges, operational complexity, exactly what I'd been doing for 20 years. "It has its rewards," I said. "I imagine the profit margins are quite good," Elizabeth added, "for the right properties, in the right markets." Vanessa was completely lost now. She didn't understand property investment, profit margins, or market dynamics. She just knew her father was supposed to be poor and embarrassing. "We should probably discuss the rehearsal dinner," Derek said diplomatically. For the next hour, we planned a wedding that would cost more than most people's houses. Vanessa nodded along to every expensive suggestion, calculating debt she couldn't afford, committing to a lifestyle she couldn't maintain. When we left, Elizabeth walked us to the door. "Darius," she said quietly, "I'd love to continue our conversation about real estate markets. Perhaps over coffee sometime?" "I'd enjoy that," I replied. In the car, Vanessa was silent until we reached the freeway. "What was that about?" she finally asked. What about?" "The way she was talking to you, like you actually knew about real estate investing." I chose my words carefully. Maybe she was just being polite. It felt like more than polite. It felt like recognition. She was closer to the truth than she realized. Monday morning, October 21st, Elizabeth Bradford made the phone call that would change everything. I was in my building's basement, reviewing mechanical system specifications with Luis, when my cell phone rang. "Mr. Hayes?" This is Elizabeth Bradford. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Of course. I've been doing some research since our conversation yesterday. Hayes Holdings LLC appears on quite a few property deeds in King County. Historic buildings, premium locations, significant investments. She'd done her homework. Property records were public information, but it took connections and knowledge to access the right databases. Yes, that's correct. Darius, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I hope you'll give me a direct answer. Are you the Hayes behind Hayes Holdings? No more games. No more tests. I am. Long pause. I could hear her processing the implications. Your daughter has no idea, does she? None whatsoever. May I ask why? I climbed the basement stairs while I explained. 5 years of character testing, waiting for respect that never came, watching her choose embarrassment over truth. I understand, Elizabeth said when I finished. Richard and I have both built businesses from nothing. We recognize the work ethic, the sacrifice, the intelligence required for what you've accomplished. What we don't understand is why Vanessa doesn't see it, because she's never looked past the uniform. Well, she's about to learn. I'm calling a family meeting for Wednesday evening. Our house, Derek and Vanessa, Richard and myself, and you. It's time for some honest conversation. Wednesday evening, 6 p.m. Same Bradford living room, same lake views, completely different energy. Derek and Vanessa arrived first, both looking puzzled about the sudden meeting. Vanessa wore her nervous smile, the one she used when she sensed trouble but couldn't identify the source. Thank you both for coming, Elizabeth began. We wanted to discuss some important matters before finalizing wedding plans. Richard gestured for everyone to sit. The seating arrangement was telling. Derek and Vanessa on one couch, the Bradfords on another, me in a chair facing all of them. First, Elizabeth continued, we owe Darius an apology. We've been operating under some misconceptions about his background and career. Vanessa's forehead creased. Misconceptions? About his work, his success, his position in the business community? I don't understand, Derek said. What misconceptions? Elizabeth pulled out a folder from the side table. Property deeds, business licenses, permit applications, all bearing the Hayes Holdings name. Your future father-in-law is a very successful real estate investor, she announced. Hayes Holdings owns multiple properties throughout Seattle, including the building where Vanessa lives. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Vanessa stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. That's not possible, she said weakly. It's not only possible, Richard added. It's impressive. We reviewed the portfolio. 60+ million in assets, strategic acquisitions, excellent market timing. Derek was looking back and forth between me and the documents. Mr. Hayes, you own Vanessa's building? I do. How long? 6 years, since 2018. Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. But you're a janitor. I do maintenance work because I choose to, I explained. Because I want to understand every aspect of my properties. Because I believe in the dignity of all honest work. She was shaking her head, trying to reject information that contradicted 5 years of assumptions. But the rent, I pay market rate for that apartment. Elizabeth and Richard exchanged glances. Actually, I said gently, you've been paying half of market rate, $4,100 instead of $8,200, what I called the family adjustment. The color drained from her face. $8,200? Derek asked. Vanessa, you told me the apartment was a great deal because I thought it was, she interrupted. I thought I'd found a bargain. You found a father, I said quietly. Richard leaned forward. Vanessa, your father has been subsidizing your lifestyle to the tune of nearly $50,000 annually for 5 years. The math hit her like a physical blow. $250,000 in rent subsidies, plus college tuition, plus graduate school, plus countless dinners and emergencies and loans that were never repaid. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, tears starting. Because I wanted to see who you were when you thought I had nothing to offer except a father's love. Derek was staring at his hands. The restaurant. What you said to him. I know what I said, Vanessa whispered. Elizabeth pulled out her phone and showed the screen to everyone. I recorded a portion of Sunday's conversation, the part where Vanessa asked Darius to lie about his work history. You recorded us? Vanessa's voice rose in panic. I wanted to understand the family dynamics we'd be joining, Elizabeth said calmly. Now I understand them completely. What does that mean? Derek asked. Richard answered. It means we're reconsidering the wedding timeline and the guest list. and our family's participation in this union. The room fell silent again. The implication was clear. The Bradfords were withdrawing their support. "But we've sent invitations," Vanessa protested. "We've booked the venue." "Which you're paying for with what money?" Elizabeth asked pointedly. "Your marketing coordinator's salary? Or were you planning to rely on more family adjustments from the father you publicly humiliated?" Derek stood up abruptly. "I need some air." He walked to the windows overlooking the lake. When he turned back, his expression was pained but resolved. "Vanessa, I love you, but I can't marry someone who treats their family the way you've treated your father. Derek, please. He sacrificed everything for you, subsidized your entire adult life, and you repaid him by calling him a broke loser in front of strangers." "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," I said gently. "The information was always available, the building directory, the lease documents, the way Scott and Louise treated me, the business calls, the property knowledge. You chose not to see it because it was easier to believe you were superior." Elizabeth stood up. "I think we're done here." "Wait," Vanessa pleaded. "We can fix this. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know you are," I said, "but apologies don't rebuild character. They just acknowledge its absence." As we prepared to leave, Richard handed me his business card. "Darius, we'd still like to discuss those investment opportunities. Perhaps lunch next week?" "I'd be honored." Outside, Vanessa sat in her car crying while Derek stood by his, looking lost. The wedding was off. The subsidies were ending. The truth was finally out. Thursday morning, October 22nd, Patricia Morgan called with the final lease documents prepared. "Standard language, market rate, 30-day notice period," she confirmed. "Rent increases from $4,100 to $8,200 monthly effective November 15th. Security deposit adjustment required. All legally compliant. Send them today. Electronic delivery or certified mail?" "Both. I want clear documentation." At 10:15 a.m., the email arrived in Vanessa's inbox. "Lease renewal notice, Unit 2402, immediate attention required." She was at work, sitting in her marketing department cubicle, probably still processing the previous night's revelations. The subject line alone would have stopped her cold. Patricia had crafted the letter with perfect legal precision. "Dear Miss Hayes, please find attached your lease renewal agreement for Unit 2402, effective November 15th, 2024. Due to market adjustments and the expiration of previous rate considerations, your monthly rent will increase from $4,100 to $8,200. This adjustment reflects current market conditions for comparable units in the Capitol Hill district. The security deposit will be adjusted accordingly to $16,400. Please review all terms and return signed documents within 10 business days. Failure to comply will result in standard lease termination procedures. Sincerely, Patricia Morgan, ESQ Legal Counsel, Hayes Holdings, LLC. At 10:17, my phone rang. "Dad?" Vanessa's voice was shaking. "I just got an email from a lawyer about my rent. Patricia Morgan. She handles my property management legal affairs." "Your property management?" "Dad, this says my rent is doubling." "To market rate, yes. The family adjustment is ending." "Family adjustment?" She was crying now. "Dad, I can't afford $8,200 a month. My salary is $68,000 before taxes." I did quick math aloud. "After taxes, insurance, and retirement contributions, you probably net around $48,000 annually. $8,200 monthly rent would be $98,400 yearly. That's more than I make." "Yes, it is." "So what am I supposed to do?" I paused. This was the moment she'd either accept responsibility or demand that I fix her problems again. "You could find roommates," I said calmly, "or look for a smaller apartment, or negotiate a higher salary. Those are normal adult solutions to housing costs." "But Dad, this is my home. I've lived here for 5 years." "It's my building, Vanessa. You've been a tenant with special privileges. Those privileges ended when you decided I was an embarrassment." The line went quiet except for her crying. "Can we talk about this? Maybe work out a payment plan or something?" "You can discuss lease terms with Patricia Morgan. She handles all Hayes Holdings tenant relations now." "Hayes Holdings, that's really you?" "That's really me. I don't understand how this happened. How did you afford to buy buildings?" For the first time in our conversation, she was asking the right question. 30 years of saving every paycheck from custodial work, living below my means, studying real estate markets, making smart investments, working 16-hour days to build something better. But you never told me. I tried to show you. Every day for 5 years, I tried to show you that honest work has dignity, that a person's value isn't determined by their job title, that respect should be automatic, not earned through wealth. Scott Reynolds knocked on my office door. I was in the building's management suite, not the utility room. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, windows overlooking Elliott Bay. The office Vanessa had never seen because she'd never bothered to ask where I worked. "The Peterson lease is ready for signature," Scott said, handing me documents. "Also, Unit 1847 has requested a maintenance follow-up." "Schedule it for this afternoon," I replied, then returned to Vanessa's call. "Dad, are you in an office?" "Yes." "Whose office?" "Mine." Another silence while she processed this information. "You have an office." "I have several offices. This is the building management suite for the Capitol Hill property. I also have offices at the Fremont and Georgetown locations." "I've lived here 5 years and never knew you had an office." "You never asked. You assumed I worked out of the utility room." "Because that's where I always saw you. Because that's where the actual work happens. Offices are for paperwork. I prefer being hands-on." Luis appeared in the doorway holding a tablet. "Bill, the inspector's here for the Fremont Avenue project. You want to meet with him now or after lunch?" "Now is fine," I told him, then spoke to Vanessa again. "I have to go. Building inspection appointment." "Wait, Dad, please. Can we meet tonight? Talk this through?" "The lease terms aren't negotiable, Vanessa. Market rate is market rate." "I'm not talking about the lease. I'm talking about us, about our relationship." I considered her request. She sounded genuinely distressed, not just about money, but about understanding what had happened between us. "Dinner tonight, 7 p.m., Il Cielo." "The restaurant where you called me a broke loser?" "Yes, same table you assigned me to." "Dad, I can't afford Il Cielo anymore if my rent's doubling." "My treat," I said, "but this time you sit at the table in the back." At 3 p.m., Derek called. "Mr. Hayes, it's Derek Bradford. Could we talk?" "Of course." "I wanted you to know that I broke up with Vanessa this morning." I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for my daughter's pain, relief that Derek had shown character when it mattered. "I'm sorry to hear that." "I'm not sure you should be." "She spent an hour trying to convince me that you were the problem, that you'd manipulated the situation to embarrass her. What do you think? I think you gave her every opportunity to show respect and dignity, and she chose status and appearance instead. Smart young man. I could see why the Bradfords were proud of him." "She's not irredeemable," I said. "Just immature." "Maybe. But I can't build a marriage with someone who treats family like that. My parents were right to be concerned." At 5 p.m., Patricia called with an update. "Vanessa contacted our office 3 times today. She wants to negotiate the lease terms." "What did you tell her?" "That Hayes Holdings doesn't negotiate market rates. If she can't afford the apartment, she's welcome to terminate the lease with proper notice." "Any other calls?" Derek Bradford's attorney called about wedding vendor cancellations. They're handling all termination fees and penalties. Very professional. So Derek was taking financial responsibility for the canceled wedding. Character again. At 6:30, I walked 3 blocks to Il Cielo, wearing the same Brooks Brothers suit I'd worn to the family meeting. The maitre d' recognized me. "Mr. Hayes, your usual table?" "Actually, I'd like the small table in the back, the one where you seated me Tuesday night." He looked confused but led me to the corner table. Same view of the dining room, same distance from the other guests, same subtle segregation Vanessa had arranged. At 7:15, she arrived. Red eyes, minimal makeup, wearing jeans instead of her usual work attire. She looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the daughter I remembered from her college years. She sat down across from me without speaking. "Order whatever you want," I said quietly. "I'm not hungry." "Order anyway, we might be here a while." Over the next 2 weeks, the consequences of 5 years of disrespect played out across every aspect of Vanessa's life. The rent increase was just the beginning. On October 25th, she placed an ad on Craigslist. Professional female seeking roommate. Capitol Hill penthouse. $2, $700 month plus utilities. The responses were immediate but problematic. Most people wanting to share an $8,200 apartment expected luxury amenities, parking, doorman, gym access. When they learned the building was a historic renovation with basic services, interest dropped quickly. "I can't find anyone willing to pay $2,700 for half a penthouse with no parking," she told me during our Wednesday dinner at Il Cielo. We'd started meeting weekly, same table, same time, working through 5 years of misunderstandings. "What about 2 roommates?" I suggested. $1,800 each. Then I'm living with strangers in my own home. "It's not your home, Vanessa. It's my rental property that you can no longer afford." The words stung, but they were necessary. She needed to understand the difference between ownership and occupancy, between privilege and entitlement. On October 28th, Derek's mother called me. "Darius, I wanted to update you on Derek's situation. He's handling the breakup well, but he's concerned about Vanessa's financial circumstances." That's kind of him. He asked if there was anything we could do to help. I told him that enabling someone who hasn't learned accountability would be a disservice to everyone involved. Elizabeth Bradford understood long-term consequences better than my own daughter. "How is Derek handling the wedding cancellations?" "Professionally. The vendors understand. Most of Seattle's wedding industry knows about the family situation by now." Word was spreading through social circles. The tech community was small, interconnected, and gossip traveled fast. Vanessa's public humiliation of her successful father was becoming a cautionary tale about character and respect. On November 1st, Luis Gomez knocked on my office door with concerning news. "Bill, Vanessa's been asking tenants about their rent amounts. Mrs. Chen in 1205 said she was asking detailed questions about lease terms and building ownership." "What kind of questions?" "Whether they knew who owned the building, whether they'd heard of Hayes Holdings, whether they thought their rent was fair market value." She was investigating, trying to understand how long I'd owned the building, how many other tenants were paying full rate, whether her discount had been unique. What did Mrs. Chen tell her? That Hayes Holdings had always been a good landlord, professional management, quick maintenance response, fair rent increases. She had no complaints. Translation: every other tenant respected the landlord Vanessa had called a broke loser. On November 5th, Scott Reynolds reported a more serious development. Vanessa scheduled a meeting with me to discuss building management issues. She wants to review her lease history, rental payment records, and building ownership documents. What's her authority to see those documents? As a tenant, she can see her own lease and payment history. Building ownership is public record, but she's asking for information beyond her scope, such as other tenants' lease terms, building operating expenses, your personal financial information. She was trying to build a case. For what? I wasn't sure. Unfair housing practices? Landlord misconduct? A legal challenge to the rent increase? Schedule the meeting. Answer her questions within tenant rights guidelines. Don't volunteer additional information. On November 8th, Patricia Morgan called with Vanessa's next move. She's retained an attorney, Stephen Walsh from Walsh & Associates. He's requesting all documentation related to her tenancy, including any special arrangements or family considerations in her lease terms. What did you tell him? That her lease terms were established by mutual agreement, documented in writing and legally valid. The current market rate adjustment is standard business practice. Is she planning legal action? Walsh specializes in tenant rights and housing discrimination. He's probably exploring whether she has grounds for a lawsuit based on sudden rent increases or family relationship exploitation. The irony was perfect. She was considering suing me for being too generous. On November 10th, Derek called with an unexpected request. "Mr. Hayes, could we meet for coffee? I have something important to discuss." We met at Victrola on Capitol Hill, 2 blocks from my building. Derek looked tired but determined. "I wanted you to know that Vanessa contacted me yesterday. She asked if I'd be willing to help with her rent situation." "What kind of help?" "Financial support. She suggested I could cover the difference between her old rent and the new rate, as a gesture of friendship. $4,000 monthly, $48,000 annually. She was asking her ex-fiancé to subsidize the lifestyle she'd lost when she lost his family's respect." "What did you tell her?" "That my parents were right. Enabling someone's bad choices prevents them from learning better ones." Wise answer. She also suggested that you and I were conspiring against her, that the rent increase was retaliation for our breakup, not genuine market adjustment. What do you think? "I think you could have doubled her rent years ago if you wanted to hurt her. The fact that you waited until after she publicly humiliated you shows remarkable patience. Derek Bradford had better judgment than my daughter." On November 12th, 3 days before the new lease terms took effect, Vanessa made her final attempt at negotiation. She appeared at my building office without an appointment, dressed professionally, carrying a folder of documents. "Dad, I need to talk to you. Landlord to tenant." "All right." She sat in the chair across from my desk, the same one where other tenants discussed lease issues and maintenance requests. "I've done some research, market analysis, comparable apartments, tenant rights regulations. And Capitol Hill penthouse units average $7,500 monthly, not $8,200.
You're charging above market rate. I pulled up current listings on my computer. Show me 3 comparable units available for $7,500. She couldn't, because she'd looked at overall averages, not premium corner units with city views and historic character.
Even if market rate is $8,200, she continued, sudden increases of 100% violate Seattle tenant protection ordinances. Which ordinances? Rent stabilization measures that limit annual increases to inflation plus 3%. Those ordinances apply to existing market rate tenants. You were receiving a family discount that was always subject to modification. The lease agreement specified that promotional rates could be adjusted with proper notice. She opened her folder and pulled out a copy of her original lease. Section 12, subsection C, highlighted in yellow. Promotional rental rates are subject to review and adjustment at landlord's discretion with 90 days written notice. I'd given her 30 days, but the lease allowed for promotional rate changes. Dad, please, I'm asking you to reconsider. Not as your daughter, but as a tenant who's never missed a payment, never caused problems, never violated lease terms.
You've been an excellent tenant, I agreed. But you've been a disappointing daughter. So this is punishment. This is consequence. There's a difference. What's the difference? Punishment is arbitrary retaliation. Consequence is the natural result of choices. You chose to prioritize appearance over character. The consequence is losing the benefits that character-based relationships provide. On November 14th, her last day at the old rent rate, Vanessa made her decision. She signed a new lease for a 1-bedroom apartment in Ballard. $1,600 monthly, 40-minute commute. No view, no character, no connection to her father's legacy. But it was what she could afford with her choices. December 7th arrived, the date that should have been Vanessa's wedding day. Instead, it was the day she finished moving out of the penthouse apartment that had been her home for 5 years. I watched from my office window as the moving truck loaded her furniture.
Same corner unit where she'd lived, subsidized by a father she'd called a broke loser. Same building where she'd walked past Luis Gomez without acknowledgement. Where she'd never noticed Hayes Holdings on the directory. Where she'd assumed her good fortune was due to her own cleverness rather than someone else's generosity. Derek had called the day before to check on me. "How are you handling this, Mr. Hayes?" "It's the right outcome," I told him. "Painful, but right. Do you think she's learned anything?" "Time will tell." At 3 p.m., Vanessa knocked on my office door. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked exhausted but somehow more genuine than I'd seen her in years. "I wanted to say goodbye before I left." "Come in, sit down." She took the chair across from my desk one last time, but now she looked around the office with different eyes. The real estate awards on the walls, the architectural plans for building renovations, the financial publications on my desk, evidence of a career and success she'd never bothered to notice. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "You've already apologized." "Not really. I apologized for not knowing about your business. I apologized for being embarrassed, but I never apologized for the core problem, which is, I never respected you as a person. I only saw what I wanted to see, and what I wanted to see was someone inferior to me, someone who needed my help, my charity, my patience. This was the conversation I'd been waiting 5 years to have. Why do you think you needed me to be inferior?" She considered the question seriously. "Because it made me feel superior. Because it was easier to be the successful daughter helping her struggling father than to acknowledge that everything I had was because of what you'd built. And now? Now I understand that character isn't about what you own or what title you hold. It's about how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you." She was crying, but quietly, without drama. "I treated you terribly, Dad. And I treated Luis terribly. And Scott. And everyone I thought was beneath me. I was wrong about all of it. What are you going to do differently?" "Learn to stand on my own merit. Pay my own way. Stop assuming I deserve special treatment because of who my father is or what family I come from." That sounds like a good start. Will you have dinner with me sometimes? Not at Il Cielo. Somewhere normal. Somewhere I can actually afford. I'd like that. And will you let me earn back your respect? Not your money, not special favors, just your respect. Respect was never something you lost, Vanessa. It was something you never claimed. It's always been available to you. She stood up and hugged me. The first genuine physical affection we'd shared in years. "I love you, Dad. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to figure out what I had." "You didn't lose everything. You lost the things that weren't really yours to begin with. After she left, I sat in my office looking out at the building I'd bought, renovated and maintained with my own hands. Same building where my daughter had lived subsidized for 5 years. Same building where she'd learned to stand on her own. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover their own strength. 6 months later, Vanessa sent me a photo of her new apartment. Small, modest, but decorated with pride and furnished with what she could afford. The caption read, "Home is what you build yourself." She was learning. If you've been in a similar situation with family members who take your generosity for granted, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes setting boundaries is the most loving thing you can do. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from around the world.